If one big government is bad, imagine how much worse two big governments would be. But that's what people living in Europe have to deal with. Their own nation's bloated government and the supranational government of Europe, now known as the European Union. Bureaucracy times two. How's that for a horror show? Well, actually, you've no idea. It's worse than you think. Believe me, I know, because for 17 years, I've represented South East England as a member of the European Parliament, the EU's legislative body. I was also leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, or UKIP, where I led Britain's effort to leave the European Union. To their everlasting credit, that's just what happened on June 23rd, 2016. The United Kingdom left the European Union. The world knows it as Brexit. Brexit is a statement of national sovereignty. Don't misunderstand me. I like nations. I like borders. I like the people that live within those borders, making their own laws. But I don't like it when faceless bureaucrats make laws for nations they don't even live in. But that's what they do in the European Union. Imagine a Belgian telling a Brit how much he can charge his customers, or the reverse. The EU bureaucrats do this in a myriad of different ways, all day, every day. It is a conspiracy of the elites. Who are those elites? Well, they're a bunch of self-important, overpaid social engineers with useless college degrees who have never done a proper day's work in their lives and have no connection with ordinary, decent people. I'll take the good sense of an Italian farmer or a French baker over the arid intellectualism of an EU bureaucrat any day. And I say these things not as an anti-European. I love Europe. It's a fantastic, exciting, great continent. Different peoples, languages and cultures. But these peoples, with their languages and cultures, have effectively been hijacked by a giant, ever-expanding bureaucracy, the European Union. People will say, but isn't there a parliament, a European parliament that represents the people of Europe? Well, yes, but this body has got no real power. It can't make its own laws. Rather, the power resides with the European Commission. They're unelected and they can't be removed. And that's how absurd the whole thing is. The European Parliament meets in Brussels. At least, that's what I thought when I was elected there. But once a month, do you know what happens? They load the contents of our offices and papers into big plastic trunks. And they put those trunks on lorries. And they drive them nearly 400 miles down Europe's motorways to a French city called Strasbourg, where for 4 days, the contents of our office and our papers are put into a new office, and the Parliament then sits there. 12 times a year, this back and forth happens, and this from an organisation who say they want to reduce their level of carbon footprint. This from an organisation whose accounts have not been given a clean bill of health by the auditors for the last 20 years. This, a Parliament, it's more like a travelling circus. Now, all of Europe knows that it's costing nearly 300 million euros every year to move this back and forth from Brussels to Strasbourg. So why isn't it reformed? Well, the way the EU's been structured, to change that would require changing the treaties. And to change the treaties would need all 28 member governments to agree not to go to Strasbourg 12 times a year. And you know something? The French are never going to agree to that because it's in their economic interests for the travelling circus to go to Strasbourg. And it shows you that a system of lawmaking has been devised where not only can the voters not change anything, but the institutions themselves are pretty much incapable of reform. Unfortunately, this is no laughing matter. Let me give you an example my countrymen know only too well. The United Kingdom is an island. It's surrounded by the sea. And yet, as members of the European Union, we were only allowed to catch 20% of the fish swimming in territorial British waters. What that meant were tens of thousands of jobs lost in Britain's coastal communities as we effectively gave away the ability to look after one of our greatest resources to a bureaucracy based in Brussels. No wonder we left the EU. Again, I have nothing against Europe, quite the opposite. I want good relations between all the European nations. I want prosperous, free and fair trade between those nations. But I'll be damned if I'm going to give up my rights as a British citizen so that some Eurocrat can tell me how to live. I won't do it, and I'm certain that across the continent, ultimately, the French and the Italians won't put up with it either. I'm Nigel Farage for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
In May 1940, Adolf Hitler and his Nazi war machine were sweeping across the European continent. The future of the free world hung in the balance. An isolationist-leaning United States was an ocean away. There was one man who stood between Hitler's seemingly invincible army and crushing defeat. That one man was Winston Churchill. He was born on November the 30th, 1874. Though we think of him as the quintessential Englishman, he was actually half American. His mother, Jenny, was the daughter of a wealthy New York stock speculator. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was of English nobility and a major political figure. From his early school days, Churchill recognised the power of words. Throughout his life, he used them with consummate skill. They never let him down. He first made a name for himself as a war correspondent in the 1890s, covering conflicts in Cuba, northern India, the Sudan, and South Africa. Though he never abandoned journalism and became one of the greatest historians of his age, Churchill used his family connections and his own fame to launch himself into politics. His confident manner and matchless oratory marked him as a natural leader. 1914 and World War I found him in the key position of First Lord of the Admiralty, where he did much to modernise Britain's navy. In 1915, Churchill thought he could bring a speedy end to the war by opening a new front in Turkey, which he perceived as the weak link in the German alliance against the Allies. This led to the infamous Gallipoli campaign. Badly underestimating the fighting strength of the Turks, thousands of British, Australian and New Zealand soldiers were killed in battles that proved to be every bit as indecisive and bloody as the campaigns on Europe's Western Front. Churchill took the blame. This was perhaps the low point of his life. Dismissed from the War Cabinet, 5 months later he enlisted in the army, where he saw action in France. He rose again in British politics throughout the 1920s, making money, as he always did, through his writing and speaking. As Adolf Hitler took power in Germany in the 1930s, Churchill was one of the first, and certainly the loudest voice in England, sounding the alarm. But it was an alarm few in England wanted to hear. The English had been traumatised, as had all of Europe, by the shocking amount of death and destruction of the First World War. No one wanted to face the possibility that it could happen again. Churchill, however, saw that a new confrontation with Germany was inevitable. And when the inevitable arrived, with the stunning German attack on France in May 1940, a desperate nation turned to him. He was ready. His weapons were his pen, his voice, and his words. "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat," he told the House of Commons in his first speech as Prime Minister. Things quickly turned from bad to worse. France collapsed, Belgium surrendered, and 250,000 British soldiers barely managed to escape from Dunkirk. Even as the war news moved from dangerous to desperate to disastrous, Churchill never wavered. In speech after speech, he infused the British with the spirit to fight on against Hitler's monstrous tyranny. "We shall not flag or fail," he said after Dunkirk. "We shall go on to the end. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall never surrender." The point about Churchill in 1940 is not that he stopped a German invasion, but that he stopped the British government making peace. If Churchill had not been Prime Minister, the pro-appeasement Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax would have been. We know that Halifax was open to negotiating with Hitler. We'd be mistaken to assume that the German Führer's terms would not have been reasonable. They probably would have been very reasonable, as Hitler wanted to fight a one-front war against Russia. And an agreement with Britain would have allowed him to do just that. Churchill made this impossible. Had he not rallied the British people in the face of defeat after defeat, preventing Hitler from concentrating his full efforts on Russia, the entire history of the free world would have been much different, and undoubtedly much darker. Because of Churchill's efforts and the marvellous resilience of the British people, the United States had an unsinkable aircraft carrier, Britain, from which to mount the liberation of the European continent in June of 1944. For this, and so much more, free people everywhere can thank the greatest man of his age, Winston Churchill. I'm Andrew Roberts for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. Please consider making a tax-deductible contribution so that more people can watch PragerU videos.
Blaming others for your problems is a complete waste of time. When you do that, you don't learn anything. You can't grow and you can't mature. Thus, you can't make your life better. In my 3 decades as a professor and clinical psychologist, I've learned that there are 2 fundamental attitudes toward life and its sorrows. Those with the first attitude blame the world. Those with the second ask what they could do differently. Imagine a couple on the brink of divorce. They're hurt and angry. The unhappy, bitter husband recalls the terrible things his wife has done and the reasons he can no longer live with her. The harried and disillusioned wife, in turn, can describe all the ways her husband let her down. Each has a long list of necessary changes for the other person. Their prospects for reconciliation are grim. Why? Because other people aren't the problem. You're the problem. You can't change other people, but you can change yourself. But it's difficult. It takes courage to change, and it takes discipline. It's much easier and much more gratifying to your basest desires to blame someone else for your misery. Consider the youthful activist making a statement against the corrupt capitalist system by smashing in the storefront of a local business. What has he done other than to bring harm to people who have nothing to do with his real problems? The guilt, doubt, and shame he will inevitably feel in consequence will have to be suppressed so his beliefs can remain unchanged. And that suppression will do nothing but foster his anger and alienation. In the play The Cocktail Party by American English poet T.S. Eliot, one of the characters is having a very hard time of it. She speaks of her profound unhappiness to her psychiatrist. She tells him that she hopes her suffering is all her own fault. Taken aback, the psychiatrist asks why. Because, she tells him, if it's her fault, she can do something about it. If it's in the nature of the world, however, she's doomed. She can't change everything else. But she could change herself. Now, there are people who seem to be consigned to a terrible fate, but most of us aren't. Most of us have a chance to make our lives better. But how? Start small. Ask yourself a few questions. Have you taken full advantage of the opportunities offered to you? Are you working to your fullest capacity at school or at work? Have you, in other words, set your own house in order? If the answer is no, try this. Stop doing what you know to be wrong. Stop today. Don't waste time asking how you know that what you're doing is wrong. Inopportune questioning can confuse without enlightening and deflect you from action. You can know something is right or wrong without knowing why. Start paying attention. Do you procrastinate, show up late, spend money you don't have, and drink more than you should? It's not a matter of accepting some externally imposed morality. It's a dialogue with your own conscience. What are you doing that's wrong from your own perspective? What could you put right now? Get to work on time. Stop interrupting people. Make peace with your siblings and your parents. Diligently utilize everything you already have at hand. If you do those things, your life will improve. You'll become more peaceful, productive, and desirable. After some days or weeks or months of attentive effort, your mind will clear. Your life will become less tragic, and you'll become more confident. You'll start seeing right from wrong more clearly. The path in front of you will shine more brightly. You'll stop getting in your own way. Instead of bringing trouble to yourself, your family, and your society, you'll be a positive and reliable force. Your life will still be difficult. You'll still suffer. That's the price of being alive. But maybe you'll become strong enough to accept that burden, and in that fashion, even come to act nobly and with purpose. The proper way to fix the world isn't to fix the world. There's no reason to assume that you're even up to such a task, but you can fix yourself. You'll do no one any harm by doing so. And in that manner, at least, you will make the world a better place. I'm Jordan Peterson, Professor of Psychology at the University of Toronto for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is one of the most famous speeches ever given. It is stunning in its brevity, 10 sentences, 272 words, and delivered in just over 2 minutes. Few have said more with less. Lincoln delivered the address on November 19, 1863. He was in Gettysburg to dedicate a national military cemetery to the Union soldiers who fell at the Battle of Gettysburg 4 months earlier. The North's victory here was one of the pivotal battles of the American Civil War. Lincoln begins this way. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Lincoln goes back in time, not to the signing of the Constitution, but to the Declaration of Independence. The Constitution, in forming our government, was the product of many compromises, most notably slavery. In contrast, the Declaration of Independence declares our enduring national values. In one sentence, Lincoln summarizes the American project: liberty for all and equality of all. Now, Lincoln's assertion is twofold. First, the United States is unique. No nation was ever founded on a commitment dedicate. We cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. Lincoln is not in Gettysburg to celebrate the Union victory. Rather, he explains that those who fought were the loyal guardians of the American experiment. With their blood, they watered the tree of liberty. As Lincoln himself knew, how could his words ever compare to that sacrifice? He even speculates that the world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. Ironically, the world remembers what our 16th president said. But do we remember the actions of those who fought at Gettysburg? Lincoln answers that question with a challenge. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. Those who fought and died shouldered our nation's enduring values through the refining fire of Gettysburg and the Civil War. Lincoln points to them and challenges the living. Are we prepared to heed their example? To do what is necessary to advance the founding ideals of the Declaration of Independence? Remember, the Gettysburg Address is a wartime speech. Lincoln is steeling his contemporaries for the many battles, burdens, and responsibilities still ahead. But he's also looking to the future. He is looking to us. Lincoln concludes that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The Union won the Civil War. Slavery ended. And with it, the values of liberty and equality were given a new birth. However, the struggle for liberty and equality continued and persists today. Lincoln foresaw this. To remain a nation dedicated to the proposition that all men, all people, are created equal, and that government of, by, and for the people shall not perish from the earth, these are the unfinished work and the great task remaining of every generation. Ours is no exception. Are we up to President Lincoln's challenge? I'm Professor Doug Dowds of the Army War College for Prager University.
All right, my friends. Hi, everybody. From South Florida, I'm Dennis Prager. There are too many subjects that we have to cover here. And we have a whole board filled. But I want to go to another subject right now with Lila Rose, president of Live Action. She presents the latest Prager University video, What You Need to Know About Planned Parenthood. It is an eye-opener. Folks, when I first read it and then saw it, I was blown away just by the data. The video is not about the morality of abortion. It has nothing to do with legality of abortion. It has to do with the question of whether Planned Parenthood is or is not what it describes itself as being. I might add that YouTube has made it very difficult to publicize this particular video. This is part of the problem that you've been addressing for some time now, and we have a lawsuit pending in California court with regard to the way they treat the videos at Prager University. Lila Rose, first of all, congratulations on a fine video.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for inviting me on to make it. I really enjoyed working with you guys. That's
good. And you worked with a man that we call the living martyr, but you know as Alan Estrin.
He's awesome. He's quite the whiz too. Really pleasure to work with him.
You're blowing his image right now. So, what's the feedback you've been getting?
Well, really good feedback. I mean, definitely from, online, I think despite YouTube's best efforts to keep the video from being promoted, we are seeing it's at almost 1 million views, I think, in the last couple of days, so that's awesome. And lots of people saying, I didn't realize all of this information. I maybe was skeptical of Planned Parenthood before, or maybe I was neutral, but now I'm seeing, looking at the actual facts here, that they claim to be a healthcare provider. They claim abortion is a small part of what they do, but that so many of their services are focused on actually abortion, and they don't provide other options for pregnant women. And they've been increasing their market share of abortion over the past 10 years, while decreasing their market share of all these other and the very limited other services that they do. So people, I think, our eyes are being opened, and that's what the whole point of this video was, just to get this information in front of people.
That's why it ends by saying the enemy of Planned Parenthood isn't the right wing, it's the truth. The truth is their enemy.
Right. And I think, Dennis, one thing that's really important for people to realize, to contextualize this for folks, is that Planned Parenthood it's not just a political debate between abortion supporters and those that are against abortion. It's also the fact that Planned Parenthood is getting $1.5 million a day in taxpayer money. So that's over $500 million every year from taxpayers. And they're positioned as, the leading sponsor of the Women's March, and they're out there pretending to advocate for women and women's best interests and women's health care. And yet when you actually unpack what they do every day, you find that they are an abortion-focused corporation that is ruthlessly interested in increasing their market share of U.S. abortions while lobbying for abortion on demand through all 9 months and paid for by taxpayers. So I think once people get the bigger picture of what's really going on here, it completely changes the landscape when we look at these Planned Parenthoods clustering in our own communities, built up across our country, and now people's eyes are open to what they're really about.
That's what you did. It opened my eyes. I had no idea. Right now, the percentage of abortions in America that just Planned Parenthood performs is what, 30-something%?
Correct. It's a third of all abortions. So that's over 320,000 abortions every single year. 320,000 abortions every single year. That's 880 abortions every day in this country done just at a Planned Parenthood. These are abortions through 6 months, so up to 24 weeks at Planned Parenthood. Babies are pain capable, they're viable, they can survive outside the womb, and abortion every 98 seconds at Planned Parenthood in our country.
And the other stuff that they do is wildly exaggerated. That was the most powerful thing to me, when they say it's just a small percentage of their procedures, but their procedures are almost all abortion related.
Right. So what they do is they conflate their numbers in other areas. For example, they talk about giving out birth control prescriptions, or they talk about doing ultrasounds or pregnancy counseling. But the reality is an ultrasound at Planned Parenthood is only used for abortion. They don't use ultrasounds at Planned Parenthood for any prenatal care.
That's it.
Exactly.
That's the revelation. Listen, we're going to talk again. Thank you for the video, and thank you for your work.
Thank you, Dennis.
Lila Rose. And it's something to see. She is worth seeing in every way. She's very attractive, very bright, very important message at Prager University.
Imagine there's an organization that claims to stand for one thing, but actually stands for another. Imagine this organization calls itself a healthcare provider, but it's not involved in preserving life, it's involved in ending it. And imagine that you help finance this organization, whether you want to or not. Well, you don't have to imagine. This organization exists, and it has a name with which you are very familiar. It calls itself Planned Parenthood, and the deception begins right there. Planned Parenthood doesn't help people plan for parenthood, it helps people escape it. And that's only the start of its deceptions. Planned Parenthood tells you it's one of the nation's leading women's healthcare providers, but it provides very little healthcare. It tells you it provides adoption referrals, but the only adoption advice it is likely to offer is Google it. Most deceptive of all, Planned Parenthood tells you that abortions are a small part of what it does, but it performs more abortions than anyone else in America. Here are the facts. The folks who run Planned Parenthood boast that they provide life-saving cancer screenings. And they do, just not that many of them, less than 2% of the nation's screenings each year. They talk about providing breast exams. They do, but just not that many of them, again, less than 2% of the nation's total. They talk about providing ultrasounds, but the last thing they want to do is show a pregnant woman an image of her growing child. So they don't. The ultrasound is only for Planned Parenthood's use, to better facilitate patients' abortions. In other words, abortion, not women's health, is Planned Parenthood's reason for being. Every year, it does more than a third of all abortions in America, over 321,000 of them. That's equivalent to every inhabitant of St. Louis or Pittsburgh wiped out every year. That's over 880 abortions every day, an abortion every 98 seconds. And while the number of total abortions in the United States is going down, Planned Parenthood's market share of abortions has increased from 23% in 2006 to 34% in 2016. So when Planned Parenthood says it's devoted to women's reproductive rights, What it means is it's devoted to aborting as many babies as possible. And here's the biggest deception of them all. Planned Parenthood would like you to believe that abortion is only 3% of the total services they provide. 3% doesn't sound like very much, does it? But here's how they get to that 3%. They count every discrete clinical interaction as its own service. What is a discrete clinical interaction? Pretty much anything you do from the moment you walk into one of their clinics. I'll give you an example. Let's say a woman comes into Planned Parenthood for one service, an abortion. Before providing an abortion, Planned Parenthood has to confirm that the woman is pregnant, right? So they administer another service, a pregnancy test. That's 2 services. Then, after the abortion, on your way out the door, they hand you a prescription. That's 3 services. And there are many other services provided during the abortion process that Planned Parenthood claims as discrete clinical interactions. In this way, Planned Parenthood is able to rack up 9.5 million of these so-called services each year. Divide the number of abortions, 321,000, by 9.5 million, and you get 3%. Even the Washington Post, a Planned Parenthood ally, declared this 3% figure very misleading. Rich Lowry of National Review nicely illustrated this phony statistic. It would be like Major League Baseball saying they sell 20 million hot dogs, but only play 2,430 games, so baseball is only 0.012% of what they do. So why does Planned Parenthood engage in all these deceptions? Well, as they say, follow the money. According to federal law, the United States government is not permitted to spend taxpayer money on abortions. But Planned Parenthood receives over $500 million a year in federal funding. Not for abortions, mind you, but for those other discrete clinical interactions. Over the last 10 years, its annual clientele has dropped 23%, almost a quarter. But during this time, its taxpayer funding has skyrocketed from $336 million in 2006 to $543 million in 2016. The reality is, just about everything about Planned Parenthood is a deception. Its purpose, its funding, its very name. That's why Planned Parenthood's biggest enemy isn't conservatives or religious people. Its biggest enemy is truth. I'm Lila Rose, founder and president of Live Action for Prager University. PragerU is truly making a difference. Please consider making a donation today to help keep the videos free and to help PragerU continue to reach more young people.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Dennis Prager Show.
Telling me
before I go to my guest, the latest Prager University video is given by a charismatic young woman, Candace Owens, Director of Urban Engagement at Turning Point USA, which we work with at the Prager University a great deal. They do great work at college campuses, truly great work. The newest course at PragerU, it's gotten 1.5 million views in 2 days, is Dear Celebrities, No One Cares What You Think. I love it. God, do I love it. Candace, congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited that I was able to partner with you guys on this.
You really, you gave a truly lively read. Your heart was in it.
Yeah, it definitely was. I felt that it was high time that somebody told them, because I figured they would pick up on it. All of the social cues, Donald Trump in office, their ratings are slipping, but apparently they still needed a public service announcement, and I was very happy to provide it.
Let me explain to people what Candace does, and it's just terrific. You will love it. You'll smile for 5 minutes. And basically, she names some names too. We don't really care what you think, but they don't believe that, Candace. That's the reason. Do you know? This was the lowest ratings in Academy Award in the modern history of the Academy Awards. You know that,
correct?
But they will read. This is my opinion. Tell me what you think. They will read nothing into that.
Oh, no, you are absolutely right. We already saw Jimmy Kimmel is blaming it on Netflix, and he's saying, which is factually incorrect, that the ratings have been deteriorating because of Netflix streaming. They just refuse to accept the truth, which is that they're not demigods. They are not demigods. Their opinion does not have more value. They do not hold the moral high ground, and in most cases, they are not more educated than anybody else in this country. So it's amazing to me, and it's actually appalling that they have turned something that people used to look forward to into sort of this liberal convention where they look out at everybody else and tell them why they're better.
Well, it's another manifestation of a rule of life that would help people understand much of what's going on. Whatever the left touches, it ruins.
That is absolutely correct. They do, and we are seeing that time and
we
time
can't experience joy. They're joyless. They're anti-joy. I really believe that. They loathe happiness.
I actually 100% agree with you. It seems to be that way. They don't even know how to sit down and just accept awards. Like, I just remember growing up and liking these events because they would say something funny.
Yeah, exactly, and know that what they, as your point is, they're movie stars. They should play the role of a movie star.
Correct.
And by the way, I think there's service in that. First of all, it's a noble profession, acting. And secondly, people want to have an escape from the daily problems of the society and of their life. Now you can't get that in Hollywood.
You're absolutely correct. And it's funny because I feel like these late-night talk show hosts have actually ruined late-night TV.
You got it right.
It's interesting to see them all do this. This is not what it was like when we had Jay Leno on air, right? Now we've got everybody just trying to push pieces of legislation. It literally sounds like we're watching CNN mixed in with a few bad jokes.
Are you too young to know anything about Johnny Carson?
I am too young to know anything about Johnny Carson, but I do know who he is. But I did not watch his show.
All right. So he was the star, the greatest star of late-night talk in American history. And I was a kid, and I remember Johnny Carson well. I did not know, to this moment, I do not know what his politics were.
That's amazing.
It is.
It's
amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
And it seems like we can't even remember when that used to be the case anymore because they all feel like it's so necessary for them to speak out. And it's curious because you understand that there sort of exists this quid pro quo between leftists and Hollywood. That's really what it comes down to. They don't even know about half of the issues that they're speaking on. These are not the great scholars and philosophers of our time, So that's why I often challenge them on Twitter to have a debate. Let's have a debate. Let's have a civil conversation. I get blocked. I'm blocked by everyone.
Yes, that's right. Let me ask you, how did you become you? Did you always have these values and views?
I did not. So what I always say is that, for those of you listening who don't know, I'm a Black American. And what I say that the left has done really successful is that they have burdened our community with so many problems that we don't have enough time to learn about politics. So I come from a family, my mother is on welfare, my father is an alcoholic. And for me, my burden was student loans, right? $100,000 in student loans when you get out of school and no family that can provide you for anything financially.
You made a mistake. You should have gone to Prager University. It's free.
I know. I would have had a better education.
All right, hold on with me. You certainly would have. It does make you wonder, where do people come from? It's such a complex question for the good and the bad, and she's the good. You got to watch her video, folks. Dear celebrities, no one cares what you think. I'm Dennis Prager. We continue. Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here. Candace Owens, Director of Urban Engagement at Turning Point USA, which works with thousands and thousands of young people. I spoke at their convention in Palm Beach, Florida in December, and there were 2,500 students there. Did we meet there, Candace?
We did not, but I did hear you speak. I watched you speak, and then I went back. You were awesome, and I love that so much. Student Action Summit is really wonderful. It's like a rock concert of conservative thought.
Well, just to give people an idea, I spoke after Donald Trump Jr. and following me was it Ben Shapiro?
It was Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, I mean that's a fun-filled night for the students. There's no question.
It was really
Candace,
amazing.
you are a gem. I'm telling you, you're a catch. And the video, folks, you got to see. This is, I mean, look, it's beautiful black young woman, totally vibrant, brilliant ideas, 5 minutes, and kids will relate. I want kids to know that it doesn't mean anything to be a star.
Right.
It's one of the great lessons we could teach them. And
right.
Yeah. Well, listen.
And it's important. It's really important that they don't idolize stars and they instead start, relying on themselves. It's almost a return to individualism.
God. We got to talk more often.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. See something? Really, it's a video to see, and every kid should see this. Because this, normally I don't care I don't care about the age of the person giving it or the race of the person. Sometimes, but I live on Earth, and I live in America, and I know the reality. I mean, a truly personable, obviously bright young woman who is also black saying these things. We don't care what you in Hollywood have to say. That's big. That's why it's worth seeing. Anyway, March is a fundraising month for Prager University. I got to read to you. BuzzFeed, which is one of the largest websites in the world, or in the English-speaking world anyway, did a massive piece on us, and we thought it would be a hit piece, but it turns out, I mean, they're not thrilled with us, but there's nothing you can hit us on. It's very interesting. They don't know what to do with us. We're so powerful and yet so responsible. There's no wild video, nothing. And yet 600 million views last year, and they acknowledge we're changing kids' minds and adults' minds. So we need your help. All right, give a donation now if you could. Go to PragerU.com or my website in the banner, or just call 833-PRAGER-U.
Dear celebrities, I'm sorry to be the one to have to break this to you, but we do not care, not in the slightest particle of an imaginary thing, what you think. If this surprises you, I understand, because, let's be fair, we have played an important role in your delusion. We camp out for days to buy tickets to your sold-out shows, then shout for you to reach down from the stage to touch our hands. Faster than science would believe humanly possible, we learn the lyrics to your every song and master the choreography to your every dance move. We devour your movies, TV shows, and Netflix specials. From that angle, I suppose it's easy to believe that after all the adulation, all the fan mail, and all the magazine covers, you may have actually come to believe that we care what you think. But you're wrong. Nobody cares what you think. Nobody. Well, maybe your mother and your therapist do, but we don't. Not even a little. Allow me to spell this one out for you. I go to a Lady Gaga concert to hear her belt out tunes that remind me of my messy college days. But watching her desperate protest against the results of a free and fair election? Hardly an event I'd ever care to see again in my lifetime. I follow Beyonce because, let's face it, nobody does a breakup anthem better. But can someone please tell me why I should care if she's for Hillary or for Garfield the cat? And here's to you, Marc Jacobs. You design a killer pair of shoes, but as a political philosopher, you leave a lot to be desired. In fact, it's difficult to comprehend why you thought it necessary to publicly refuse to dress our First Lady. And to the scores of celebrities who threaten to move out of the country if we don't vote your way, Wow. Just how long on a private jet must one travel to reach that level of narcissism? This may rock your glittery world, but we don't care whether you stay in America or move to another country. Why would we care where you live? On the one hand, we should find all of this amusing, but on the other, it's actually deeply offensive. It's offensive that you confuse our admiration for blind faith. When Eminem raps that I have to either pick him or the President of the United States, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Which is why it's important that I take this moment to offer each and every one of you celebs a free ride back down to planet Earth. What happens outside of your gated communities, chauffeured SUVs, and personal assistant's iPhone is the real world. It's the rest of us working very hard to earn a living, working toward that weekend break when we can perhaps afford to treat ourselves to your concerts, your movies, and your handbags. You see, we want to enjoy what you do. Sing, dance, act, design. It's a wonderful gift you have, and it's extremely valuable, not only to you, but to us. Entertaining people, making them laugh or cry, is something that you should take pride in. You enrich our world with your talent. But when you go on a political rant on late night TV or call your fans racist and sexist, my God, these people are your fans. Just because they don't think or vote the way you want them to? You cross a line. You lose touch with reality. You become just another shill for another politician. And who wants to be a fan of that? I'm Candace Owens for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.